thinking about Mythic Plus keys,
Mm.
but I don't think it came from anybody like doing Mythic Plus or anything. I just think at some point I put together grip it and rip it and send the key. That's what it means. It's like start the key, grip it and rip it,
Just
right?
send it. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
we are live. We're still behind the blue curtain, but yeah.
Oh, I'm glad everyone can hear this. Okay, this is good pre-show banter. All right, we
Yeah.
can make like TikTok clips out of this or something if we ever
Sure.
care
I
to.
just, I just wanted you to know in case you had like an ultra spicy take that you didn't want eternally on the internet. But we're live on both sides, so I think we're good to do this. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host, Mango.
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Odyssey, but before we do that, buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
On this podcast, we return to, I don't know, what was like the year where we were just doing movies all the time, like 2023? We return to the year 2023 where we just did movies all the time. And we're going to talk about a movie, which we haven't done in quite a while, I feel like. Obviously, the Odyssey has come out. It is a gigantic smash hit, over $1 billion. Matt Damon, I mean, there's a million people in this. Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne
John
Hathaway, Robert
Leguizamo.
Pattinson, John Leguizamo, who's great in this,
You,
actually.
you know, you
Quite a
always,
lot of people are great in this, I would say, actually.
what was very funny to me is Caroline leaned over to me and said, "Is that Ralph Cifaretto?" And I was like, "That's John Leguizamo."
It's absolutely not Ralph Cifaretto, who is an actor whose name I don't remember. But I think of him as he's Ralph Cifaretto. He's also in The Matrix.
Yeah,
But I guess they do kind of have that, like, I don't know, look.
yeah, that was my. I think she asked because we watched The Matrix recently, and I was like, I paused it and I was like, "You recognize him?" She's like, "No." I'm like, "It's Ralph Cifaretto," and it was good.
Yeah, so the Odyssey came out. It has a bazillion actors. Christopher Nolan made $1 billion off of Oppenheimer, of all things, and so he just has the blankest of blank checks in all of Hollywood. I said in the thing that decided to start at the very beginning of stories and make his own version of the Odyssey, which is pretty cool. Honestly, it's pretty neat. I love that this guy can just do what he wants, and he makes weird stuff. He kind of bucks the norm, it would seem. Though also maybe not the norm, since 25 years ago Gladiator and Troy and all of these historical epics came out and made $1 gazillion, so it's not crazy.
Yeah, I will say I think he's like one of the last people doing like true blockbuster style movies. Like the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies are obviously their own creature, but they are
Hmm.
not not tonally blockbusters in the same way that the blockbusters of yesteryear were. Right. They have too much, they're too funny, essentially. Um
Yeah,
whereas
I think
like
that there's a real question around like Spielberg, kind of James Cameron, sort of auteur named directors who kind of were their own franchise, right? Like one of the things that was true sort of in the 90s is that Steven Spielberg was his own franchise. It didn't matter what he was working on. He did Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, I think in the same year. It was like one of those. And I feel like Christopher Nolan is in that space. Where he has kind of become a director who you can put his name on the thing and he will sell tickets because you put his name on the thing. And there are not a ton of those left in the same way anymore.
yeah, Spielberg did
Probably.
Disclosure Day this year, which flopped terribly, right?
Yeah, that's certainly true. I mean, James Cameron has a little bit of this. Like obviously, like Avatar, I think is built on his star power. Some of the more modern directors are probably like James Gunn for sure. Zack Snyder, maybe ironically,
Well, I say
and probably not so much at this point.
Supergirl flopped, right? Which is James Gunn, right? Or was
Yeah, well, I mean, he didn't direct it, right? Like
Oh,
he
okay.
was the
That's
he
fair.
runs DC or whatever now, but Superman was a big hit last year, and that was
True.
obviously James Gunn. But anyway,
True, true.
so this is sort of the landscape that we find ourselves in. It's the first movie ever to be shot entirely on IMAX, which was crazy. I did not even realize this because I just kind of thought we had done one of these already, right?
Oh, then
But
it
there are
was
a number of films that kind of swap in and out. The most recent notable one I can think of is Sinners from last year was an IMAX Swaparooski, where some of the scenes were shot in IMAX. Oppenheimer obviously was also like this 3 years ago. Oppenheimer, everybody pretty universally was like, why? Why is this in IMAX, right? But boy, the Odyssey, you get it. I get why this movie is in IMAX. It kind of could only be shot this way, which is pretty excellent.
sure. All right. Well, let's get to pre. I mean, it's the Odyssey, so you can only spoil it so much. But let's do
Oh my
our
god, did you know there's a Cyclops? Oh, wow, they're sirens, right?
let's do pre spoiler impressions. So,
Yeah,
buddy,
what is your pre-spoiler review?
I think it is good. I think it is overrated. In fact,
Ooh, okay.
like because people have been talking about this is like the second coming of Christ. It's like no, it is. I thought it was. I liked it worse than Oppenheimer. I am actually, you
Oh,
know,
interesting. You're
m-
kind of down on this movie. I definitely liked it
relatively.
better than Oppenheimer, I think.
I'd say I am relatively down on this movie. I have actually
Mhm.
spoken to several people who are not or who are much more down on it than I am. But those are personal friends.
Interesting.
But
You should dox them on the podcast,
oh, it's
okay?
my
So
brother.
that I
Uh,
know. Oh, okay. Really? Oh my god.
yeah. But he was not a fan of the of various aspects of it. I will not try to represent his opinions here. Maybe we can get him
And
on here to.
we should have gotten everybody on the podcast. I'm definitely down on it compared to the second coming of Christ. Like, I don't think it is a best picture contender, in sort of a weird way, but I don't know. Man, I kind of do also at the same time. The thing is that it's not even. This was my big complaint about it. My sort of frame of reference reminds me of something my father used to say to me about um restaurants, right? Which is that if a restaurant's going to do everything right, it ought to be dessert because then you walk out and you go, man, that was great. And the Odyssey is like that. It actually it comes together in the end and it is awesome. But there's a lot of stuff in the middle there that really doesn't work until, and like I would make the case and the argument that the movie sort of saves all of that stuff. It kind of gets good at the end and brings it all around, and that feels sweet. But maybe for the first hour or so I was watching it, I thought to myself, boy, this is kind of a stinker. It's really not great. And I don't know. I think that's interesting. It's sort of notable. One of the things I quite appreciate about it is that it is not a plot twist movie, which is what quite a lot of Nolan films are based on around. It is sort of like a thematic twist movie, which I thought was very complex, and sort of new territory for him. Kind of all of his other movies are doing a little bit of magic, a little bait and switch, kind of thing. There was none of that in the Odyssey, but the bait and switch that's there is all happening on a thematic level. You kind of think the movie is saying A, and really it's saying B. And if you're picking up on the details and kind of, sort of disentangling them on sort of that level, it sort of like it all kind of works and it comes together. But I thought it was really interesting, just like on a plot level, that it was so straightforward that he didn't really kind of fuck around all that much
I mean,
with what, like,
it's the Odyssey, right?
I
Like,
know, I know, I know. But like, I don't know, you can do a million things, right? One of the things, I mean, I don't know, it's interesting because there's all this stuff about like the historical accuracy of it or whatever, but we don't have to get into
no, I would say
get into any of that.
Caroline is fairly down on it, for like not necessarily historical accuracy, but like textual fidelity reasons, and not like the the culture war things, but like um basically like this Odysseus is supposed to be clever, and this
Mhm.
Odysseus is just kind of like stoic, right? Like the thing I came away with going out of the movie was like, if you haven't seen Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey, imagine Christopher Nolan did The Odyssey, and you're there, right? Like it is exactly what I expected it to be, 110%. Like there was no surprise for me in the in the offing. Uh,
So there is surprise for me, but it comes I actually don't know that I think of this as a Nolan thing. I actually think the most important counterpoint to this movie is Interstellar, which is it's
I
not
have
a
not
movie I've
seen it.
seen in a long time, but ironically it's the last movie he did with Matt Damon. Or unless Matt Damon was in his previous movie. Was he in Oppenheimer? I want to say yes, actually. But whatever the case may be. Um Interstellar, I think is a bad movie. I don't think Interstellar works, and I think it's because Christopher Nolan is specifically bad at one thing, which is like conveying emotional nuance and complexity over the course of sort of film, especially sentimentality. Right? This is something that Steven Spielberg is excellent at. Steven Spielberg is like a mondo sentimentalist of a filmmaker who like even in a movie that's essentially a slasher film, but the slasher is a fucking shark, can get you on board with like the sentimentality of the father son relationship between, you know, whatever, Roy Scheider and the kid, that kind of stuff. Nolan's sort of the opposite of this. He doesn't have a sentimental bone in his body, and he's very, very bad when a movie is trying to sell you on kind of emotional nuance and sort of stakes, which I ironically think made him very well suited to the Batman pictures, where those pictures are not super sentimental and the emotions are very big and obvious and straightforward. And there's not a lot of crazy, there there's not a lot of that kind of stuff where you have to get really sort of detailed in sort of the emotion of the thing. Interstellar is a story that is all hinging on detailed sentimentality where you need to sell the relationship between this father and his daughter who hates him, but their connection, which is love or whatever, is the fifth dimension, and it's going to be the thing that gets him home and solves this crisis for Earth or whatever. I don't think any of this works in that picture. And it's because he's very bad at sentimentality, right? The Odyssey has a very similar sentimental sort of hook to it, and I think he gets there. And I actually think he gets there in a relatively kind of clever, I would almost even say new way for him. Maybe not that new because Oppenheimer and Inception both did this thing pretty well, but this is all deeper stuff. So I don't know. Maybe we can come back to it in a bit after spoilers or something like that.
yeah, sure. We can put this spoiler one here. The last thing I wanted to say is that like my
Yeah.
kind of hot take coming out of this is I think Christopher Nolan is like the most overrated director of the current age. And this is not me saying that he's bad. I just think that he is
Whoa.
rated higher than he is. I also famously think that Tenet and Inception are horrendously overrated. So, there's that. Um,
That is so interesting. God, that's so interesting. Just on a recommendation level, do you recommend it for people?
yeah, sure. I mean,
Okay.
uh, what would I say? Uh, I would say if you want to go see a movie, go ahead. If you were not otherwise inclined to see a movie, I don't think this is like, run out of your house to see it level, right? Like I would
Oh,
have said
interesting. Oh man, I like this movie so much more than you now that we're talking about it. Holy fuck. I thought I was gonna be on the under here.
like I said, I don't dislike it. I think it's fine. I just don't like, like I would have told people to go see Barbenheimer for the cultural moment, right? Like
Mm.
say it's the Odyssey, right?
Yeah, the thing about the Odyssey, I would certainly recommend people go see it, and I would especially recommend that they see it in the theater, right? Like there are a number of movies that we do where I just kind of feel like you can watch that shit on your phone. You can watch that shit on your laptop or something like that. Like I don't super care, and I don't think that the movie is very well built for this. Obviously we haven't talked about the back rooms or Obsession, but I have a lot of I don't know, I've just heard that those movies are kind of iPhone movies in the sense that you should be able to watch them from your phone without too much trouble, and I'm sure I will when I fucking finally like go watch them or whatever. The Odyssey is the kind of picture that I feel like completely loses the point if you are not in a theater with like tremendous surround sound or whatever else, right? Where you can kind of get immersed in the thing. I obviously saw it in 70 millimeter because everybody was freaking out about it, and that was the way that I wanted to see it. And that experience was great for we can talk about sort of in a minute. I probably am down on that experience, mostly because I don't think the movie gets all that much I don't expect, I guess technically I haven't seen the 30. print. I don't expect the movie gets all that much better at the sort of 70 millimeter sort of scale, compared to the amount of how hard it is. Like, if you live in fucking New Mexico and you have to drive across state lines to go see this thing, probably don't.
I would say
It's just
somebody
not that
did the
crazy.
kind of like the thing. It's like there's like several continents where you cannot see this movie in 70 millimeters. So you
You know
know,
what's funny? In Southern California, I think 6 of the like 25% of all of the theaters are all in Southern California, right? Like, when I was living with in Los Angeles, I think from my Los Angeles house, I was probably about an hour from 5 of those 6 theaters because I don't know, it's LA, I guess. But yeah, I drove an hour for it. I guess I did cross state lines, but in New England that doesn't really count. Yeah, so I drove an hour for it in Massachusetts to sort of go see it, and I think that was fine, and that was worth it. And I'm definitely going to be doing this. Frankly, I'm much more excited to do this for Dune later this year, than I am for sort of the Odyssey. But whatever the case may be.
yeah.
I would
My
recommend
hang
people
up
go
is
see it.
that
This is a theater thing.
that particular theater does not have assigned seating, and I
Yeah.
cannot. I just like am not going
We
to.
did have to wait in line for about 45 minutes. You show up to the theater and there's just a line and you just get in that line. And Rachel and I had made enough time, shall we say, to get there early, which is code for I thought I had bought for the 3 p.m. screening and I bought for the 7 p.m. screening. So we were down there at 2:30 and I was like, huh, okay. But then we ended up just like sitting in line for 45 minutes or whatever, which I'm sure other people would find annoying. And at the time, I didn't care because I was sort of wasting it. But I am sure for, like I said, for Dune later this year, where I am sure to do this exact same thing, I'm going to happily wait for 45 minutes so that I can get a nice center. That's the thing I always care about I kind of don't care how close or how far back. I want to be centered on the screen. I hate looking at the screen side like an angle.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Apple Theaters in Hooksett, New Hampshire,
Mm-hmm.
and or Apple Cinemas, and watch it in 35 millimeter IMAX, or maybe in RPX if I'm feeling very spicy in Portsmouth. And by very spicy, I mean like absolutely less spicy because it's
The one hot take thing I will say about IMAX is that I actually wish, and I wonder if there are any of these near. I wish I had saw it in the special Dolby, um, the Dolby Cinema. I can't remember what it's called. Dolby Vision, I guess.
mm,
I have talked about this on the podcast. It used to be just the closest theater to my house, and they had one special theater that was this Dolby theater. But the thing about it that was so insane, and I frankly think it just made many, many better. Um, that Dolby format makes blacks blacker, because it's like a special kind of like laser format, and I almost universally think that makes every movie I have ever seen in that format much better because your contrasts are like way starker, and that tends to make things sort of look better. I don't think that the IMAX 70 millimeter, as cool as it is up to par with that Dolby Cinema experience. And I think if I were to rate my overall movie going experiences, the Dolby it's kind of the best one.
sure, yeah. No, I mean, I put a little bit more value on like the the kind of in theater experience, and like the comfortable chairs are worth a lot to me, right? So
Oh yeah, I totally get that. Yeah.
yeah, like both
Yeah,
both.
the thing about the 70 millimeter, and this is kind of what I mean, it's like, it maybe makes the film 5% better or 10% better or something. Noticeably better, but minimally, I would kind of say, right? It's like it gives you this ability to get so lost in the picture because your entire field of view. This is the thing that's really magic about it. Your entire field of view gets taken away. Even your peripheral vision is still the picture, and that's like a really magical thing that's kind of impossible to replicate anywhere else, right? Unless you're doing one of these super giga gigantic sort of IMAX sort of screens. But I did not feel like you know I did not feel like the shots themselves were like only comprehensible in this massive thing where it's like it's a big picture, like it's like I'm in the Louvre, and I'm looking at a painting, and every little corner is like a new detail or whatever. That's not how these work in my experience. It's just kind of that like secondary thing of your peripheral vision is sucked away and you are completely surrounded and subsumed by the sound and the visuals of this thing. I actually think maybe the sound is also more important than the visuals kind of at the end of the day, because there's a lot of stuff going on with sort of the oral landscape of the Odyssey that I thought was really tremendous. Like to talk about sort of the sacking of Troy, which is sort of the complex, sort of emotional climax of the movie, if not really the climax of sort of the plot. The like raucous cacophony of that was very moving, I found. And I think that was just carried entirely by a really complex, well-made soundscape.
Sure. All right. Well, let's officially put our spoiler marker here, and
Sure. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. You had said that you thought all the performances were good. I found several of the performances to be a little too tied to the character, right? Like I thought that Matt Damon felt like very Matt Damon. Like I was not a fit. It felt like Matt Damon doing the Odyssey, right? Who else
Okay.
they feeling this way about? I liked Tom Holland. Felt very Tom Holland, but I was okay with it. I thought he was
Tom
fine.
Holland was probably my least. I don't think he's very talented.
Hmm.
Is the thing. Tom Holland was my least favorite performance. He got there in the end, I guess is what I would say. Kind of everybody really came together at the end, but there were a number of people who I thought were Anne Hathaway, actually kind of amazing, to be honest with you. I think everybody knows that Anne Hathaway is good. I kind of didn't really like get it that like boy, she's actually really amazing. She is a sort of transcendent sort of actress. I liked Matt Damon quite a lot. I'm actually my favorite performance in the movie might be the Indian guy whose name I don't know. I really loved him. I thought he was really excellent. And I liked Menelaus, the king of Sparta, Agamemnon's
I
brother
like I
that
like John
died.
Bernthal. Uh,
Yeah, John Bernthal, who I also think is very talented.
yeah. So the Indian guy, who I also cannot remember the name of, he felt like he was like I've seen him in a couple other things. His name's like he felt very like he was playing the character he always plays, which is less. I don't know. He felt less natural in the role to me.
Just so I feel better about this, his name is Himesh Patel, and he is playing Eurylocus, I guess, who is obviously, Odysseus' second in command.
Yeah, I just I don't know. I I I felt like none of the performances really particularly blew me away. Like I like John Leguizamo. I thought he did a good job.
I
Um,
also thought he was excellent. Yeah,
I thought
he might
Charlize
be.
Theron was
Yeah.
felt very Charlie. I felt like there was
Mhm.
too much like I recognize that guy stuff in this movie, and people playing their characters like they are, as people seeming more like the actors than the characters. And I think that's normally not a huge issue, right? Like Matt Damon is allowed to be Matt Damon in The Martian or in Saving Private Ryan because he's like those aren't otherwise established characters, right? But Odysseus is a known character. We will
Mhm.
maybe talk about this later. I think George Clooney did a better Odysseus than Matt Damon did. And some of that's the writing, right? Like I think that Ulysses Everett McGill is a is closer to the character of Odysseus than Matt Damon's Odysseus is, and I think that's in the writing. Um, but I also think that like Matt Damon does not project being what I imagine Odysseus to be, right? Or like what I get from it's been a long time since I
Yeah,
read the
I
epic, but
do get that, and I think I'm there, but I forgive the movie this. I kind of think the movie's allowed to, like, in my mind, this is covered in sort of, let's call it adaptational sort of budget, right? Where when you are making an adaptation, you get your license to kind of change some stuff, and turning Odysseus from a sort of cunning trickster character to a clever but tortured sort of warrior, like a very smart but also
I would say I
you
don't
know.
think he's particularly clever in this movie. Like,
What do you mean? He does all the same clever stuff he does in the
no,
fucking
he
Odyssey.
doesn't. Very famously, he doesn't do the fucking nobody joke, right? Because Christopher Nolan didn't think it would translate. Um, I think he just kind of
But
like,
like everybody else, he does all the other like I mean I get you. He's not 100%. He doesn't do 100% of the stuff that Odysseus does, but he does a bunch of stuff, right? He makes the Trojan horse. He, outsmarts the Cyclops. He, tricks his crew into going to Scylla. I actually think that there part of the problems that I have with Odysseus are that they leaned not hard enough into sort of his tortured. If you're going to make Odysseus the smart but tortured soldier, you they kind of needed to push him harder in that direction, I sort of think, and instead of waffling a
so
little bit more, he comes in as a beggar at the very end. Like all that stuff is like fucking Odysseus stuff.
I think he comes across as smart, but I don't think he comes across as clever
Okay.
for that distinction there, right? Like I think there's like an impishness that and like a level of like self-assuredness in the classical character that we don't get in this
Yeah.
version. Um and I
Yeah, so that's really my point. Is I think that is fine. I think you're allowed to kind of change that in your adaptational sort of budget for a picture like this one and go, well, my version of Odysseus leans more into this, that, and I'm trying to tell this sort of story. I just kind of say, sure, fair enough, kind of
uh,
thing.
I I think you're allowed to, but I'm also allowed to not like it, right? Like
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean about budget. Because like I think bad adaptations overspend on their budgets, where they go, "I'm going to make a bunch of changes," and then you overspend your adaptational budget, and everybody goes, "This is garbage. Like, what are we doing here? Why do we bother?" Bad adaptations, of which I'm sure we can name 100, right?
sure.
Fall into sort of these sorts of problems. And then there's some stuff where like, and I think this is just kind of happening on a taste level, right? There's some stuff where I am willing to sort of forgive a thing because it's adaptationally whatever, and there's some stuff, and maybe we'll talk about a funny instance of this later, where I am not willing to forgive something because it adaptationally doesn't make any fucking sense to me. And like, if you're on the other side of that line, I think that's fair enough,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing.
Yeah. I also I wasn't a huge fan of the pacing of the movie. It seemed very like
Yeah.
choppy and fast. I have heard that it was originally longer and they had to cut it down to 3 hours because of the physical limitations of the 70 millimeter projector. Um, but like the part where he like in with it's Cersei's the one with the pigs, right? Like I always get the
Yep.
yeah. Um where he grabs the crow. I just kind of missed that because it happens in like a flash. Um and I felt like that you could have like if you had like a like first of all, they didn't actually push it all the way to the limit. But like there were a couple of things that could have used like an extra second or two of context to let things be a little bit clearer on the screen.
I agree with you. I thought the pacing. This is really what I meant about the
Mm,
early stuff. I really struggled to kind of get on board with the movie because it was sort of setting up all of this stuff that was going on. And it starts in Ithaca, and it's actually in Ithaca for quite a long time before you go to sort of Odysseus and the horse and Troy. And it does, pretty. This is normal for Nolan. He likes sort of jumping around in time and stuff like that. It goes to him in Calypso, and then he's trying to remember like where things kind of like went from there. But I just, man, God, I would have loved it if it just kind of had a more straightforward opening. Like, I think you just could have opened on the fucking horse. I really wish it sort of did. And then you cut to Penelope in Ithaca and you start dealing with her stuff as a traditional sort of subplot. But because Nolan is Nolan and he wants to use it framing to, all of the stuff with Ithaca, which is it's really slow. It doesn't set the scene, sort of well. The stakes come together, but they come together much later. And I just like, God, I feel like you you really could have rewrote the opening of this movie and made it beautiful, but they sort of didn't. But then, Odysseus sort of gets on his way. He starts sailing. He's going to go on the southern winds or whatever. They get to the Cyclops, and kind of everything past the Cyclops, it was fine. It sort of came together. I was happy with it. But just the opening, I was really out of it. The opening, I was actually pretty afraid I was going to be like, this movie sucks,
Yep. How did you?
The other thing, I'm sorry, the other part of this, by the way, is that the division of the characters, the such a crux of the movie is when Odysseus and Penelope meet again. Does that moment work or does it sort of fail, right? A lot of movies have moments like this that where they just completely collapse. Like Batman versus Superman, especially I love that movie obviously. The Martha moment is that for most people, right? The whole movie hinges on selling you on this moment, and if it cannot, it collapses, right? And the movie really delivers on the Odyssey for this one. Really delivers, I think, on Odysseus and Penelope sort of like reuniting, and it clicks the whole picture together, right? But like that's also kind of a dangerous sort of set of circumstances to be in, to sort of say like, okay, can you sell me on this incredible thing, this like incredible moment of sentimentality where I can feel what it's like for these two people to be so desperately painfully in love with each other, but for but having been 20 years apart kind of thing. And the fact that it can, I think, is actually quite, this is the thing that I was like, this is crazy, this is new for Nolan. He's never really been able to do this thing to me before, but I also don't think it's really on him. I think it's literally just the actors. He just sort of let Anne Hathaway carry all of that.
I would agree that I think Anne Hathaway carried that. Again, I don't think Matt Damon did a lot in for this, but
I did like Matt Damon in this. I really want to defend Matt Damon in this. I thought he was less his Matt Damon self. I sort of expected him to be more, kind of like you said, because I think of his default personality as being more of a trickster, more clever. He likes who he is in The Martian or
yeah, that's
something, right?
fair.
Which is maybe his kind of like defining performance, but I don't know. He's also, there's this taste bit of this, which we can talk about, which is that he is doing a character that I love. I love like archetype of a guy, a clever but tortured warrior is always going to be like high on my list.
Sure. I get that, but I also I don't think that's Odysseus in a lot of ways. And
One other performance that I want to point out, just because I also thought it belongs on the list of excellent performances, was Elliot Page and Sinan. I thought that stuff was great. I didn't get it at first, but then meeting him in the afterlife, I was like, "Oh, this is awesome. This is cool. This is excellent."
I don't think he was on screen long enough for me to consider it to be anything that I would rate. Right? I thought it was fine. I don't think it was bad. I just it was like less than 5 minutes total. I felt the same way about the other culture war touch point like Lupita Nyong'o, right? Like
Yeah,
sh- sure he
completely.
screamed at the camera real good that one time, right? That was like he's not on screen long enough. In the chat, Rachel, buddy, watching a movie where the main character matches like 80% of his D&D characters. Huh, I like this guy. Sure. Uh,
That okay, that is I that I'm being oblique about this, but I will say that I came out of that movie and I said Matt Damon had some real Tonrick energy, okay? Because that is very much like who the character in like the stories that we have told in World of War, kind of my World of War character. This like very sort of tortured, but he's old and he's very clever, and also he goes on this rampage at the end. And I literally wrote like a whole story where a very similar thing happens with Tonrick, and I was like, wow, this was amazing. So I will say for the record that Odysseus is quite a lot like my personal fan favorite. I don't know what you call it, creator favorite, I guess, character. So
yeah,
that plays into things, I'm
I,
sure.
I do think a lot of this is like it came off to me as a lot of kind of like like the like jack off motion, right? Especially at the end where he's like, "Our age of bronze is ending." I'm like, "Okay, thanks, guy. Thanks for putting it into
He
words."
said our age of bronze is collapsing, which is a reference to, and I thought this was clever and interesting. I did not think that they were going to go there, but they kept talking about the sea. I was like, this, if we talk about historical accuracy for the record, this is the part that pissed me off. Because he's referencing the Bronze Age collapse, which is a real thing that did happen, the first globalized world that ever sort of fell to ruin. And there were a number of questions, for a long time it was sort of this historiographical myth of how this happened. A lot of people said quote unquote the sea
The people.
peoples,
Yeah.
because which was essentially sort of like these raiders from the west who kind of came in and just completely pillaged these supply lines as essentially sort of pirates. In modern times, we actually think that these are Sardinians, people from the Isle of Sardinia, who sort of did this. But actually, it's a confluence of a number of different factors. There were also a bunch of droughts and political unrest in Egypt and stuff at the time. And the thing where she goes, "You were the sea peoples," to sort of like Matt Damon, I was like, "Oh, come on. Sh- shut the fuck up." That's you know what I mean?
Yes,
That was
yes,
the
that is
that was
exactly
one
what.
of the that was one of the places where I would say the adaptational budget really pissed me off, okay? Cuz you know, I get the
Oh, you cut out for a second there. Am I still going?
point way that,
Oh,
you know, Agamemnon's ruthlessness has evolved a sort of peaceful, interconnected kind of society, and Zeus's law is getting broken, and just all this other fucking idiosyncratic stuff. But like turning a real historical people that you keep alluding to into sort of that kind of point, that did make me mad. Rachel in the chat says maybe the real sea peoples were the friends we made along the way. It's just kind of how it feels. Okay.
yeah. No, it's I. That was another thing that annoyed me, right? Like, that whole kind of like bit was just like it felt very kind of like heavy-handed, right? Like, and I do think that that is, I think the strength of the adaptation is, as you said, the thematic turn, right? Like the kind of
Yeah.
change. And I actually listened to an interview with like a classical historian, talked about how like some of this is you can read actually into the original Odyssey. It's just like, obviously a little bit more oblique. Part of it's also just kind of how to translate an ancient Greek text or whatever. But like the idea of like, um Odysseus being deeply affected in a negative way by his experience of the war is something you can very much read into the text, even if it's not as apparent as they make it in the movie and in the original text. So
Yeah, and I also liked this feeling that like he did offend. You know, there's this whole thing where the crew think he offended the gods. He offended Poseidon by, I guess they didn't really kill the Cyclops, but he like shot the Cyclops with like an arrow, kind of in a mean way, and doing so offended sort of Poseidon. And it was one of those things that I thought was very clever because it immediately brings your attention to the fact that they're wrong. That's not correct. But he very obviously did offend the gods. He just offended Athena in the sacking of Troy, right? Um, and I thought just all of that worked like gangbusters. I'm so glad the Zendaya thing I thought actually was also incredibly
I thought that
clever.
was good.
It reminded me of the. Have you ever seen Schindler's List?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, not to spoil Schindler's List for you, but the movie's in black and white, and there is one at the very beginning of the movie, and this is a huge long movie, it's like 3 hours. At the very beginning of the movie, there is one little with like a red dress on and these red shoes. And just the only time there's color in the movie in the very beginning. And then at the very end, spoilers, I guess, for fucking Schindler's List, you see a body that is being carted away from one of these camps. Um, that is the little girl in sort of like her red dress, and that is the only two times there's picture in that movie are those two places, right? The very beginning and at the very end, and it pays off a little bit of why Oscar Schindler is the way he did, and what he did is this little girl got fucking shot in the streets of, I guess it was Warsaw or something, maybe like Berlin, who cares? It reminded me of that, where you're seeing Zendaya, you think that she's playing Athena. It makes sense for all of these other sorts of reasons. Obviously, like Calypso and Circe are there; they're on screen. It's not like the gods don't have sort of a presence. But then at the very end, you see that it's not that she's playing Athena; it's that she is a priestess of Athena who is being beheaded in the fucking temple, and how terrible that is. And I was like, oh, this is great. This is works like gangbusters.
I agree. I agree. Before we get too far away from it, I also want to say I actually thought that Robert Pattinson did a great job. I think he is like.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Oh, did you not? Did you not like him? I
No, I did. I don't know. I had a whole thing about. You can make your case before
No,
I
I
get into
would
it.
say like because he's not like a particular like the character he plays is kind of like subsumed to this at least to my memory like this idea of the suitors in the original work like he's not a one-to-one to like a character that has a lot to go off of in the original text, and so I think there's a little bit more freedom there to do stuff, and he just like you know plays a villain, right? He plays a pretty reason like like I thought I enjoyed how like shitty he was like for the role, right? Like I think
Okay.
he is good at kind of like hitting these like almost caricature level things, right? Like I see this in the trailers for Prime Time. I'm excited to see that film. It's because like his like deranged Chris Hansen impression I think is going to be great. I think he was good here as kind of like a like a almost hammy like just shy of hammy enough for me to not think it's too hammy, right? Level of villains.
I yeah, I did not like Robert Pattinson that much, but it's totally on this exact same line, and it was the character that bothered me because it felt out of step with everybody else. Everybody else is giving pretty muted performances. I actually really like hams. Typically, hams are like my favorite kind of actor is just like a guy. This is blow that piece of junk out of the sky, right? Like I love when an actor goes fucking crazy, but he just felt like he was in a different, like in sort of the wrong movie. The comparison point I had here was actually, and I think this is part of why you liked him, is Nicolas Cage, where like he kind of he had very Nicolas Cage energy, where he was going really hard in a movie I don't think called for it, and it felt off. I think there's a piece in this that I also want to chip off, which is he was against Tom Holland, who again I did not like. Also, so he wasn't working with anything really all that great. He had some stuff with John Leguizamo that I thought was smart, but mostly what he was doing was playing against Tom Holland, and I sort of thought Tom Holland sucked. So maybe I'm getting kind of pulled into the gravitational field, shall we say, um of their scenes being sort of the worst ones in the movie. But yeah, I walked away really thinking this guy is like the modern Nick Cage, where you don't know what you're gonna get at. You just have no idea.
So I get that, but I also I think he's like better at it than Nick Cage because Nick Cage just kind of like like Nick Cage works in like certain places, right? Like I have
Yeah,
people love to like clown on The Wicker Man, right? That movie is
yeah.
god awful, and it's not even like I can see Orion looking his foot in the background of your shot.
Just
Uh,
perfectly framed
yeah,
over here. You only get this in the IMAX. Okay, you have to be in 70 millimeter IMAX to see Orion licking his toes.
but point being is The Wicker Man is not so bad it's funny. It's just bad. I watched it in college. This is kind of like a I'll watch this like thing that I've seen 1,000 memes from, and it was so bad that it was basically unbearable. Right? Like I did watch all the way through, but that's just because I am bad at like not finishing things essentially. Um.
Sure.
Uh. Whereas I don't think Robert Pattinson has quite that problem, right? Like I feel like you could put Robert Pattinson in a very bad movie and he'd still be entertaining to watch. Um, but that's this is again taste stuff, right? Like I
Yeah.
I think part of the thing we're driving at here is like I think that um kind of I think of the Odyssey as like as a play, right? Like I know it's originally an epic poem, but I think of it as kind of its like play form. And in a lot of that kind of context, the characters tend to be over over dramatic and over emoted because that's a limitation of the medium, right? And so
Yeah.
that's the kind of thing I think I'm expecting from the Odyssey. And you don't get it from Matt Damon as much. You don't get like that, but you do get it from Robert Pattinson. So I enjoy that more. I think you get it
Yeah, I will
from
also say that I did love that they turned the suitors into sort of real villains, especially because I think you need to make it that way. One of the things that I think is interesting about Christopher Nolan's sort of take on the Odyssey is that it uses what I would say are pretty modern morals, right? Like there was no version of the Odyssey where people say that like the Trojan War was like bad, if that makes sense, in the same sort of way. It's like, I mean, it's a tragedy, but like the Odyssey, the Iliad are from a time where like war and conquest are acceptable parts of kind of our
Sure.
day-to-day sort of lives. So our modern lens, where those things are kind of no true, where we do think of the sacking of Troy. Really, what I'm saying is like the sacking of Troy in the Odyssey or the Iliad are like it's sort of tragic in a narrative sense because like you understand the Greek tragedy of what's going on. A lot of this is with Hector and stuff like that. Um uh but like just the idea that like war is bad, war is hell, war gives you PTSD is just kind of like not all that much, I would say, in any of this kind of classic stuff, just because they lived on a different moral rule
Yeah. No, I
and
mean,
sort of framework.
and like I said, there are ways to read it into it, but you have to read it into it. It is not text, right?
Yeah.
Like it is maybe subtext, or it expresses itself in different ways, right? Like,
And so and as an extension of that, the same thing is sort of true for like the suitors in Odysseus, right? Like it was reasonable on a moral level that you would come back, that Odysseus would come back and he would fucking slaughter these guys, right? In his house. We would, in a modern context, right? We would say that's fucking insane. But like the sleight of hand that the movie does is it just makes them these complete asshole villains. And I think the whole thing, I don't know if the thing with the lots is in there. I don't recall it, but I
I
haven't thought
don't think
about the
so.
Odyssey, the details of the Odyssey in 20 years, right? The thing with the lots, I actually think is the real key core, white hot sun of making this whole thing sort of work. Because the whole point of Odysseus' sort of rampage at the end of the is that he did go to war and all of these fuckers are cowards, especially whatever, like Antoninus or whatever his fucking name is. Robert Pattinson's character didn't. He, left. And not only did he leave, but he left and he put Sinon in a place where, Sinon would eventually sort of like give his life to win the Trojan, to win the Trojan War. And just all of that stuff is clever. This is part of the movie really coming together. When Matt Damon is just slaughtering everybody in that throne room, that is like the kind of thing that would not work if other people had messed up kind of pieces of the movie. And I think this is probably where Christopher Nolan, like this is the Swiss watch version of his sort of filmmaking that brings it all, that brings it all.
Sorry. Uh, yeah. I don't know. I think you could have got. I appreciate that, and I think
Mhm.
that it was good for kind of like the table stakes. I also think you could have gotten away with not doing that because it's the Odyssey, right? Like, I think,
Yeah.
I think there's just like the other kind of like side of the adaptation coin is that like you're bringing in a lot of baggage, and people are, I think, willing to be a lot more forgiving of things because if you're doing it in service to kind of like fidelity to the original, right? Like you could have just played it kind of straight with the suitors, right? And it would have been fine because because people know what the Odyssey is, right? Uh and wouldn't I think have blinked twice about it in general. I think you might have gotten people who hadn't seen the didn't know what anything about the Odyssey who might have been like, what? But I mean, the
Yeah,
other
there's a lot of stuff that I think it requires, like all of the stuff with Agamemnon sort of requires you to know really more the Iliad, I guess, than the Odyssey. Like all of the stuff with Agamemnon, I don't think I would really have picked up on sort of the details there, except for I have seen the movie Troy a couple of times, and Agamemnon is obviously played by Brian Cox in that movie. He's like a major character. And I just sort of know the plot beats of this whole thing, right? They don't mention Hector or Paris, like they don't mention any of the stuff that's kind of going on with the Trojans. Obviously, they don't really dwell on like Helen all that much, right? But like there's a lot of little things in there that I feel like you only get because of the cultural osmosis of the thing, right?
Yeah, but I will
Yeah.
say I think on my side of the fence, like the uh Agamemnon and Menelaus, I think are also in the mold of kind of like more kind of like exaggerated characters that I enjoyed. Like I enjoyed them as like Agamemnon doesn't say a lot, but he has like this huge imposing presence, like with the visual language.
I know. one of the best moves is that they never take his helmet off. That insane helmet with the spine coming
Yeah.
down the back. Just what a great detail. Beautiful. Loved every second of it. He's actually played by Benjamin Safdie, I'm pretty sure, who's another filmmaker. Am I correct about this? Um, let's take a look. Tell me I'm right. Um,
Yeah, Benny Safdie.
Yes. Okay. That makes yeah. Benjamin Safdie is an actor. He's been in a bunch of things or whatever. But I think that he is sort of most well known as the like a director of movies and stuff like that. The big one that everybody knows from him is it Uncut Gems is his big
Oh,
picture. I can't
it's the
remember.
Safdie brothers, right? For the or is
Yes, exactly. He's one half of the Safdie brothers. The other brother is Josh.
what
Um,
was I think somebody was telling me that like they had like a falling out and they each did a movie and each movie was clearly missing. I think this is my brother's opinion that they each did a movie and that each movie was clearly missing the thing that the other brother brought to the table. Um,
that is actually funny. Yeah, it's Good Time, Uncut Gems, which everybody really loves. I could not watch Uncut Gems
you froze for a second there.
because it is so stressful. It's so
Okay.
anxiety, like you know, shot struck directly into sort of your arm or whatever. But yeah, Benjamin Safdie. If you look at his face, if they ever took his fucking helmet off,
Oh
he
yeah.
would have looked like a moron, right? But the fact that they left it in really sort of sells the character, and you can tell that they could have done any number of other sort of casting choices. You put Dolph Lundgren or something in done the thing, but I thought it was pretty inspired to take Benjamin Safdie and leave him in the helmet.
I agree. You know what I think it is? I think it might have been our favorites at Red Letter Media that said this thing about like they're missing the other half because I'm pretty sure the one that they said was missing the Josh Safdie touch was the Smashing Machine, uh, which is
That's
the
the Rock movie, right? Where
yeah
he plays his grandfather.
yeah and what is and Marty Supreme is the is the Josh Safdie one.
Oh yeah, I didn't even realize. Wow, that does make sense. Wow, yeah. I mean, I guess that's the way it goes. It always reminds me of I used to read Penny Arcade all the time, and there's one I would say excellent Penny Arcade sort of arc. It's like a 3-issue arc, 3 comic arc over the course of 3 days. But basically, God, Tycho and who's the other guy?
Gabe.
Tycho and Gabe have a falling out in the comic, and then the next 2 comics are one is a comic that is entirely by Gabe, and it is incomprehensible, right? Like just weird action and the art, and it doesn't make any sense. And then the next comic after that, which is only by Tycho, is like huge, gigantic text bubbles that are written like a Shakespearean sonnet or something like that, and then they get back together. They're like, "Wow, we were really better together." Yeah, that's what I always think of that. Anyway, I don't know. So anyway, these are like most of my thoughts about the fucking Odyssey. I will say the number one thing that makes me think the Odyssey is an excellent movie, and this is like probably I would actually say the guttest of gut checks, the vibest of vibe checks that I make when it comes to any movie is I came out of it thinking about D&D. Is when I came out of it and I was like, "Oh, I have such a great idea for a fucking D&D campaign." Coming out of a movie. And I think that thing, it's not always D&D, but that thing of I come out of the picture and my sort of creative juices or whatever are flowing on just some other thing. That's when I feel like I've seen a good movie, that effect is happening. That effect is sort of revving at high gear. The Odyssey definitely gave me that, sort of that feeling, and that, obviously D&D is how I was channeling at the time. I was like, "Oh, I have a great idea for a D&D campaign," right? Like one of the pitches that we do for sort of Saran or whatever. But I think it speaks to kind of that underlying kind of magic of, honestly, all of it. Going to see it in the theater, seeing it in 70 millimeter, just these gigantic things. Where the thing that makes the gigantic shots work so well is like, there are moments where Matt Damon is just this tiny little speck in the center of the screen, and then you have this huge, gigantic expanse. That stuff just plays like it works so well. It looks so good. And I don't know. I think all of that is fun.
Sure. Yeah. No, and like I said, I don't hate this movie. I think it's good. I might even say it's very good. I just, it had some low points that I don't think it's as good as other people said it was. But such
Yeah,
as
it's definitely not his best. I do think it's better than Oppenheimer, but I mostly think that's because I think Oppenheimer. I am not a huge Oppenheimer lover. In maybe like Oppenheimer's gotten worse over time, and I think is not suited to Nolan's filmmaking tastes kind of at all. Um, yeah, that's mostly it. I think he gets in the way of that movie, and I think that Oppenheimer would have been better if it was directed by other people. Yeah,
I
I
need to
think
go
that's my
back and
take.
watch it
I
again.
don't
I
know.
have not seen it since
I
since Barbenheimer, but
I would also have to go back and sort of and watch it again, but it's the kind of movie that I think, like, ironically, Steven Spielberg would have killed it. He's good at that kind of picture. He can make a people in rooms talking about stuff really sort of work. But I actually think that, at the time I actually really liked it. I think if you listen to our Barbenheimer episode, I probably am contradicting myself sort of now. At the time I think I liked the sort of plot structure and using this like security clearance sort of hearing and all of that kind of stuff. I don't know. I think that episode I got really hung up on like the ethics and the historiography of it, though, because I think the movie is fundamentally trying to make a point that is untrue and unsound, right? Like, we have not blown ourselves up with nuclear weapons, actually. And nuclear proliferation is no longer happening. And, we like demilitarize, the Cold War is over, right? Like, I don't know. I don't agree with any of the ethics that Oppenheimer kind of purports about the state of global politics. Uh, so yeah,
yeah, no, I mean, but I don't know, that's just kind of that's a movie, right? Like,
I
this is
guess.
a
Yeah.
thing that actually I can. Yeah, we're close to the hour mark, so I can tell this to do a thing. I read
Okay.
the third book in the Anna and Din series. It's a mystery series, kind of like Sherlock Holmes and Watson. Um, it's like a fantasy, semi-fantasy series where there's like a lot of, it's like an alchemical Roman Empire, but in like the kind of like the Victorian era, right? Like that's kind of like the three kind of pillars, and it's pretty fun. This third book came out like a week or two ago, and I kind of it's a real page turner. I went through it super fast, and by page turner I mean audible track burner, right? Like, um, but this one, like the books always kind of have like a kind of loose connection to kind of like modern things in the real world, and this one was kind of the strong, like the preachiest, and it's basically the setup for the novel is like they are in essentially the breadbasket of the empire where they make beef cattle that are like part of the thing is they do a lot of alchemical augmentation. And these cows are like the size of like houses, and they use so many resources to get feed for the cows, right? And they're using all this land because people really like the way beef tastes, right? And then in the author's note at the end, he even talks about like, he lives in Texas apparently, and he's like very much like, and then beef cattle in Texas, and the thing there's this thing about this is like the torment nexus point, right? Like the that you hear for people who don't know. There's like a tweet
Yep.
that's like, uh, uh, tech companies proud to announce, the torment nexus from hit book don't make the torment nexus, right? Like the thing that bothers me about this fundamentally is it's fucking fiction, right? It happens that way because somebody decided to write it that way, not because it's like illustrative of anything at all in the real world. And so the flip side of that coin for me is that I don't have a problem with that in Oppenheimer because it's a fucking piece of fiction, right? Like,
Okay.
like if it was a documentary, maybe I'd have a little bit more of an issue with it. But like, I don't know. I do not take the kind of, not the moral lessons, the kind of predictions of how things will go from a piece of fiction seriously, because believe it or not, I don't think fiction writers are the best prognosticators of the future, right? Like that.
I do sort of get that. Yeah, the Torment Nexus tweet came in November 2021. I am now reads sci-fi author. In my book, I invented the Torment Nexus as a cautionary tale. Tech company. At long last, we have created the Torment Nexus from classic sci-fi novel Don't Create the Torment Nexus. Which I think a reference to the metaverse, which was because this was right after, I want to say, Facebook renamed itself to Meta and was going hard
I mean, this
metaverse and
also
stuff like
applies to
that.
like Palantir, right? Like very, very
Yes. Yeah.
clearly, right? Like, um,
Yep.
uh,
I do get that in that sense. I'm not really making an argument from the sense of like Oppenheimer was like wrong to have. I think that your point stands. I guess I will. Like I take your point. Oppenheimer, the person, can have believed about himself and his legacy that he metaphorically set the world on fire, right? Which is how the movie typifies it, right? And and like he does not think that he averted a great catastrophe. He created one and feels tremendous regret and remorse about sort of all of that. I think that is fair. Him on a personal level, right? The problem is that I think that if my read on the sort of film is correct, I think that Christopher Nolan is also making a thematic point about that, one that is echoed by a great many people with whom I would disagree, because I think the ethics of the fucking atom bomb are not something I'm not going to get into this.
yeah, yeah. No, no.
That is the part that bugs me, is the way that people talk about Hiroshima and Nagasaki sort of ahistorically, essentially, is really what it's down to, right? And viewing that as like a trolley problem for a history class is sort of thing, but like painting a picture that this is how the history of it played out is just like drives me fucking insane, because it's so off from just the truth of the world that we live in, essentially. So I'll take the L on this one. I
Yeah,
am
fair.
forever going to be butthurt that I happen to have read a lot of the history of this, and it has not matched up one to one with the way it gets depicted in popular culture.
Yeah, something that happened that just went up against this recently is um The Wind Rises, I think is the name of it, the Hayao Miyazaki film. Like, it's about the guy who designed the Zero, right? Like, and it's nothing about like, like, it's nothing about like the actual war stuff. It's just about him as like as an engineer, and it's this beautiful story, and it's very cool. And I was like, this is nice. And then I went and I looked, and it has zero fucking relationship to the actual reality, right? Like like the plot is based on an entirely different book. Oh,
Sorry.
sorry, I hope I didn't kill you.
I don't know. Something about the way you said that, and I was drinking. That was just funny.
Yeah,
Good joke.
no,
Okay, man.
but like, so in the movie, mild spoilers for The Wind Rises. Basically, the engineer marries this girl who is very sick and like is dealing with an illness. In the real life, dude's wife was fine. They both like lived until like their 80s or something and had kids, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
the plot line about the wife is from this other book that he liked, right? Like, and
I think about this kind of thing all the time. I actually think about it in relation to D&D. Like, so for instance, Kovolgrad is a plot that we have not run, but I have a whole arc in my D&D sort of overarching campaign. I guess it's kind of a narrative or something. Whatever, which is based on it's based on Stalingrad, right? I happen to know a lot about World War II. I think the Battle of Stalingrad is really interesting and compelling, and I have sort of like a D&D story that is inspired by that. But the word inspired by is really doing most of sort of the work there. And I sometimes think that, especially like in kind of the realm of film and television criticism, we can get a little too wrapped up in inspired by narratives, right? Like obviously we haven't played Kovolgrad, but it's not that Kovolgrad is one to one to Stalingrad. There's a lot of stuff that I like about how the Battle of Stalingrad played out that I want to hit on, but there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't make any fucking sense and that I'm going to get rid of, right? Because it doesn't make sense for sort of my story. And I think that people are sometimes a little loath to shall we say, sort of ditch that kind of baggage. The best example of this that bugs me on a very just fundamental level is the movie Incredibles and sort of like libertarian kind of
Oh,
like
like
ethics.
Randian
Like
philosophy.
if you
Yeah,
yeah, if you track that down, it all comes back to like one tiny quote that Brad Bird, the guy who made the movie, sort of said where he talks about like the thing that made him click was reading whatever it was, Atlas Shrugged or something like that, right? And I totally get that. This is the thing that like kills me. I totally understand where a guy like that reads a thing and comes up with, and it like fuels your creative juices in the same way that watching the Odyssey fueled my creative juices, right? And made me go, boy, I have two games in Saran that are defensive, Kovolgrad and the Siege of Korquea being stories about like cities defending against kind of attackers. But now I actually really love the idea of setting an arc for that game where you're the attackers, you're sacking the city. Like that's really interesting. That's really sort of neat. But like I would not want someone pulling the couple of sentences I just said out of context and saying, well, the only reason that Buddy or whatever, wants to do this campaign arc is because he thinks sacking cities is good. And it's like, fucking no. God damn it. You know what I mean? We are all inspired by lots of different things and we take it way too seriously when people sort of give an offhand sort of
sure,
pronunciation.
sure.
This also happens in the WoW fandom all the time. I don't know if you paid any attention to people kvetching about the reunification of the elves, but like that was like one quote that Chris Metzen gave a couple of years ago in his Elf for what Midnight was, and like people took that shit way too serious. Guys, come on. Anyway,
Yeah. I
yeah.
do I do think there's a strong case for like objectivism in The Incredibles one, but like that's neither here nor there. We can
So sure. I also totally get that, and I think that you like make these kinds of whatever, right? Like extrapolations, right? But there is a difference between the Incredibles one is Atlas Shrugged. It's not even like close to fucking Atlas Shrugged. Like
sure.
Atlas Shrugged, you know, ninja'd into a plot line. It's like no. When you're making a story about superheroes and the superheroes have these powers and whatever, like yeah, you end up in a place that is one to one with objectivist philosophy. And even Brad Bird could have been inspired by that and thought to himself, this philosophical framework is how I'm going to unlock the thematic core of The Incredibles. Great. But that's just like, I don't know. It's just a different fucking thing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Do you want to talk a little bit about Oh Brother Where Art Thou? I did watch this in last night just kind of as a comparison point. Um
Yeah, sure. I don't know. What do you have to say about it? Great movie.
yeah,
That's right. Great movie. Amazing music. Extremely well shot. Probably better than the Odyssey.
yeah. I
if I
was
if I were to put my finger on it.
and part of it for me is I love the Coen brothers. And I will say that like it tracks less one to one with the Odyssey than like I think I watched it, didn't really realize it was based on the Odyssey because I watched it in like middle school or like before I had to read it. And then heard afterwards that it was, like after I read the Odyssey, that it was based on the Odyssey, and remember it tracking a lot closer. And it's not that close. It is inspired by in a I think a more loose sense, right? Like there is the kind of like some clever stuff, right? Like the hubris aspect, right? Like uh Ulysses constantly, calling the people who believe in the gods stupid, and then praying at the end, and then then going right back to Spreading, I thought was pretty good. But it's just a good movie, right? Like it's got a lot
Yeah.
of it both engages with the inspired by and pushes against it in great way. Like the I did not realize this, but so like spoilers for a 26-year-old movie. Uh, there is a Cyclops, right? Like in the but Big John, I forget what his last name is, but he's at this clan
John
route.
Goodman.
Yeah, it's John played by John Goodman. But uh, they are at this clan rally, which is kind of like their underworld equivalent. And the Cyclops is there because again, it's not a one-to-one thing, but um, uh, somebody one of the main characters like throws a flag with a pointed end into the air and it's going right for the Cyclops. Like, oh, it's going to be like in the Odyssey where it pierces his eye, right? And he catches it and kind of throws it away and laughs. And then they cut the burning cross down and it falls on him. Like that is a great subversion, right? Like it's not over the it hits that subversion just right to work. You know,
Yeah, it also has the Swiss watch thing that sort of Nolan does, but like it's all centered around the song Man of Constant Sorrow, which that movie would not work if that song was not a banger. You
right.
know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
absolutely.
if Man of Constant Sorrow was not just like a tremendously catchy, well recorded song, it would not pay off as kind of being it's not quite the mulligan, it's sort of like or I'm sorry, the MacGuffin. It's sort of but it's sort of the MacGuffin in a way. It's like it's the thing that the heroes possess that like solves the movie for them basically
Yeah, it's like a
at the very
semi
end.
Deus Ex Machina is too strong, but
Yeah,
like
Deus Ex Machina. It's the opposite of a Deus Ex Machina because it's set up, right? Deus Ex Machina is not set up, but like it is the thing that resolves the conflict that the heroes don't even know that they have in their possession because of the limitations of whatever depression era technology and stuff like that. And that was great. I that like all there's a couple of other ways that this all kind of like comes together, but it's great. And that movie is really based more on the music I've later learned than the Odyssey itself. That mostly what they wanted to do was find a way that they could kind of make a musical that was built around this kind of 1930s Southern folk song, kind of like Appalachian sort of folk music. And like clicking everything into the Odyssey is how they figured out how to make that pitch work for studios. Um, which is great. I don't know. That movie's amazing. I love that movie. Coen Brothers, excellent, excellent filmmakers.
yeah, no, absolutely. Uh, it was great. And if 6 months from now you're listening to this episode and you're saying to yourself, I have to rent exactly one movie to watch. I'd say watch "Oh Brother Where Art Thou" over the Odyssey. And I would say that even holding independent of the fact that you probably want to see the Odyssey in like a real theater if you're going to see it, but um,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I think the Odyssey will end up being kind of like one of no sort of like legendary kind of pictures. It's funny that like Oppenheimer is the thing that won him the Oscar and stuff like that. I think his best movie is The Prestige. I still am convicted of that having seen this. Um some of his other films, I think I get worse over time. I actually really like Tenet. Going back to it, I got really obsessed with the Tenet soundtrack a while ago. I don't know if you picked up on this, but actually um the soundtrack I was using at the Reactor 10 in Rats in the Walls was the Tenet soundtrack.
mm,
Because you guys were fighting the ethereals, and ethereals have that sort of like feeling for me. Um, I don't know. Anyway, so Tenet, I think, has kind of increased in my estimation. I like it better. I think that the more people try and understand that movie, the worse it gets. The only person who has a good take on Tenet, in my opinion, is Patrick H. Willems, who said that Tenet is a vibes movie where you can't think too hard about it. You just kind of have to let it roll. And that's how it's a good movie. And that's exactly what I sort of think of it. But I think that Nolan will eventually be a legendary filmmaker, and the legendary film The Dark Knight, Inception, The Prestige, probably The Odyssey, and I think a lot of the other ones are just going to kind of fall by the wayside.
I feel it.
I think I would be really surprised if Oppenheimer held on to its cultural cachet.
I would so I agree that Tenet is a vibes movie and doesn't make any goddamn sense if you think about it, and that's why I think it's a bad movie.
Yep.
Oh,
That's a little bit of what it is. Inception, I think, is not a vibes movie. But Inception, I think, pisses people off in sort of like different
and the fundamental problems I have with Inception and Tenet is that they go out of their way to explain these rules to you, and they don't make any fucking sense, right? Like,
ways.
if he made it more vibesy, I probably wouldn't pay as much attention to it, right? Um,
In a way, I think Tenet is Nolan doing Inception, but better because it's more vibesy. But the problem is Inception does have a real plot. Like one of the things that vibes movies have to have is like plot is like 5 out of 6 on your list of priorities. You're not trying to explain the plot to people. They walk into a room, they have a very quick conversation that sets up where they're going to go do next, and then you're just right into the next action piece, right? And you're just like moving. That's how vibes movies work, right? Which is typically James Bond movies. I think is the archetypal vibes movie. Um, Inception is not that very specifically, right? It is a movie where plot is pretty central and a big focus. And I like Inception. I think Inception is sort of a good movie, but I absolutely that is a detracting kind of piece of the piece of the picture.
so the thing that kind of frustrates me about this, and it's been a long time since I've seen it, so maybe it won't stand up to a rewatching. But I think the vibes movie that does weird things with the plot that I think actually worked really well by Christopher Nolan is Memento, right? Like, I'm
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
like I'm sure if I like really tried to trace everything about Memento, I'd probably find something I was mad about. But like they don't dwell on it so much. It's like his memory doesn't fucking work right, and he writes notes on himself, right? Like, and that's like enough. Like they don't talk about why he's got a brain problem, right? And just leave it at that, and they go, and it makes for a compelling movie. Whereas, like when they sit there and like, oh well, if you have uh a thing that you can bring it into the dream, and then you can tell if you're in a dream or not. And it's like this doesn't fucking make sense, and it drives me up the fucking wall, and it has for 14 fucking years. So um and this is part of why I don't like this is why I was not like crawling over broken glass to get to see the Odyssey, right? Like I decided to see it when it was like a big hit, and it's like, okay, I will see it as kind of this cultural event type deal. Um and also that it's like freestanding, right? This is a thing that I appreciate is that Christopher Nolan does not make a fuck billion sequels, right? Like I would like to see Brand New Day, but I also would like to watch all of the things that I feel like I need to watch in order to like
Yep.
appreciate Brand New Day, right? And so I am probably not going to get that done in time to watch it in its theatrical run, which is fine by me. But
Yeah, I'm beginning to resign myself to the fact that I think I'm going to go see Brand New Day just without especially I don't know. I'm very dooming about some of this. I've seen people talk a lot about the Spider-Man movies, and people are clowning on Far From Home, which I think is the best of this series. Right? I think Tom Holland Spider-Man movies actually kind of habitually suck. Both no, is it No Way Home?
No Way Home
No
is
more
the second most recent one, and
way.
it's
Okay, yeah, No Way Home. I hated that movie, right? Go back and listen to I just complained the entire time. I think that movie misses so fundamentally the point of Spider-Man that I found it frankly kind of offensive to the character. And the fact that everybody loved this movie drove me even more crazy because I felt like I was going cuckoo for coconuts, okay? And then I also really hated Homecoming because I think it's an Iron Man, it basically what they did with Spider-Man Homecoming is they made it sort of like half of an Iron Man movie, and that just sort of annoyed me. I think the movie's better than that. Like No Way Home is a bad movie because it so fundamentally misunderstands the point of Spider-Man and more importantly some of the previous Spider-Man films. Um Homecoming is a okay, it's kind of fine, but it just annoys me in a couple of places. Far From Home, I actually think is really excellent and is a archetypical Spider-Man story told really well with really interesting sort of like plot and setup and all this other kind of. And I have been sitting here thinking, am I really going to go rewatch No Way Home? I don't. I really hated that. So I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to watch Brand New Day, and I'm going to hope that I like it. Frankly, I think that this is one of the best opportunities that the Marvel Cinematic Universe ever had to just be a normal comic book movie. And God, I hope it's that. I hope there's no MCU bullshit. It's not hard. It's not Spider-Man is so fucking it's so easy to just like he's in college, stuff sucks. He's having a hard time. He's late on his rent. Do that. Do that version of Spider-Man. Okay. And I will be the happiest camper in the whole world.
Yeah, and to be clear, I do not want to go rewatch the Spider-Man. I want to watch the Daredevil and Punisher things that I never got around to watching in the first place.
Yeah,
Um,
that's fair.
um, and like I want to like make the effort to watch some of these other series before we get to Doomsday, which I will watch because I'm gonna watch. Like I
I'm
I
like
like Doom,
afraid for
right? Like
Doomsday. Yeah.
as a character, so I'll give it a shot. But
Yeah, I also like Doom as a character. I love Doom, I think I would maybe say. I think he's maybe my favorite villain in the Marvel universe. I don't know. What other villains are in there? I have a lot of all of my Doom is one of the great villains of all time. It's probably the best villain in the Marvel universe. I am very down on this movie. Just got a cultural sense. I'm looking at. I have Twitter up on my other screen because I was searching or whatever. It says Disney Plus shares essential Marvel watch list for Avengers Day. I'm just sitting there thinking, man, there is no watch list because you pulled this out of your ass. You know what I mean? And I don't know. Pretending that it is more than that bugs me. We have never seen Doom. We don't know who he is. He has not had, you know, however many years of build up like Thanos did. Stop pretending that he does or you did. Or for the record, the version of Doomsday that I think I would like is setting up Doom as a ongoing, long-running sort of threat who exists within the universe that the heroes are dealing with. I think that this is a possibility, which is essentially Avengers Doomsday. I know they're not going here because they called the second one Secret Wars, and I know how that goes. But if you're setting up Avengers Doomsday, where Doom is beginning a process that will end up years later or something kind of you could really sell me on him where like this movie is sort of his bombastic opening and then he gets kind of defeated by the heroes Latveria you know and shows up every once in a while from now on. I would love that because I think the MCU is really missing the long running nature of villains, right? um and how sweet it would be to have them come back into the story later on as a threat or as a force to be reckoned with.
I think they will do that because I don't think you bring back Robert Downey Jr. for like a single movie. Uh,
Yeah, but this God, do you know what Secret Wars is? I don't even want to tell you this. I
I
did not read Secret Wars for the record. I just know the plot of it.
They have not historically kept close to the plots of the comics.
Okay. That you know what that is fair enough. Yeah, I guess I would say that is fair enough.
L-
The plot of Secret Wars is that Doom gets the cosmic cube and kind of like reinvents the universe according to sort of his standards, which is very cool and awesome. And you get to do a lot of cool stuff, Doom stuff with sort of that like plot hook. Um, but yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Doom. The thing that the MCU is missing, in my estimation, is villains who are out there doing stuff whose big master plans have been stopped, but they themselves are still, kind of X-Men 1 to X-Men 2, right? Magneto is out there. They break Magneto out of jail in order to help them defeat Stryker, and then kind of escapes, and then he shows up again in sort of the third one or whatever. It's like that kind of thing, right? Like I want these kind of touch point villains. Marvel Cinematic Universe hasn't done any of these really. Um, but who knows? We could be entering a new world where the MCU is good and again.
We will see. We will see.
We will see.
What else have you been up to with your week?
Do you want to talk about this fucking tweet of mine?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay. So on August 13th, Blue Thunder, who is going to Gamescom, I don't know who that is, said, here's your first look at some of the movement and traversal in Wolverine during a rooftop chase scene with the hand. Wolverine is the new Insomniac game. Insomniac is the bank Sony studio that has famously made Ratchet and Clank as their like claim to fame, but they grew up and then they made the Spider-Man Miles Morales, Spider-Man 2, right? Like all of these fucking Spider-Man video games for the PlayStation. Their next project is Wolverine. Wolverine released a month somewhere in September, and they released this game. And in this footage, there is this part where Wolverine jumps onto a clothesline. And for those of you who cannot see this at home, he raises his claws and he extends his claws and he uses his claws to slide down the clothesline. And I tweeted in response to this, how the fuck does Wolverine slide down the zip line on his claws and flip? Am I insane? Wolverine can swing his adamantium claws with such force they cut anything, but they cannot cut a rope with 250 pounds of body weight applied. This would end up going, I guess I would say, mini viral, where many people got in my mentions telling me how stupid I was for having this thought. Mango, what's your verdict? Is this dumb or is this fine?
So I think it's so. For the record, I replied to your tweet with, this is the thing that breaks your ironclad suspension of disbelief. Um, but uh, I think it's dumb. I don't think the game looks very good, right? Like the tweet that I saw about this that really resonated with me, and we talked about it a little bit beforehand, is somebody quote tweeted it and put this tweet from 3 years ago. Hulk video game 2032. Hulk investigate crime scene. Tutorial poppin'. Hulk has gamma vision that allows him to see crime particles that aren't visible to the naked eye. Tap R3 to activate gamma vision and scan for crime particles. Hulk find trail, Hulk follow. And I take your point that Wolverine does have like the sensory capacity to like follow people, but I think it's just kind of gonna be like a slop game. Like I don't think it's gonna be very good. I'm not excited for this game. Um,
I sort of think that these sort of third person action games are stuck in the past. It reminds me of Skyrim looking at this. Not in the sense that it reminds me specifically of looking at Skyrim, but it reminds me of how when Skyrim hit in 2011, it was a major, it was this huge cultural moment. And when Starfield hits in 2023, it falls completely flat on its face. And it's because this mode of RPG in Skyrim sense, but this kind of third person kind of cinematic action games in Wolverine sense, it's just not keeping up with the times, right? I'm sure that you could convince me that there are third person action games sort of structured like this that are good and worth my time. I think maybe God of War is the most recent one. I I don't know. It depends on whether or not you cut Elden Ring sort of that way, and I would say no. In my mind, Elden Ring genre than this.
it is.
Um,
It's a different
but
genre.
I just like I don't see it. I don't see this genre just feels like it is from it's like a dinosaur. This makes sense 20 years ago on a PS2. It doesn't make sense in 2026. I need to see something more interesting or advanced or complicated. I don't know. But also I've never been in the audience for any of these, right? I did not play God of War comparison. I didn't play Spider-Man, so I don't see any of this. I haven't seen any of this. Um
So
I'm sure that it could play out or be interesting, but it just misses me.
I have played both God of War and Ragnarok, and I have played Spider Man, but I've not played the Miles Morales one.
Okay.
Um, and I will say that Spider Man I think works. Not I think the combat's not great, but web swinging is such a joy that it carries a lot, right? Like you can do enough
Yeah.
things that aren't the combat and just swing around, and that's great. Wolverine doesn't swing on webs, right? So I don't think it's gonna work in that way. With the God of War comparison, God of War is fine. I think it gets pretty like I saw I think it was a clip from like Northern Lion or whatever that guy's name is. It's something like, the problem with God of War is it's like and he's much angrier in his video, but it's it's like a 40-hour game that is like really a 10-hour game that they just put endless amounts of like unconnected combat in the middle of because you can't give people a 10-hour game to tell the story that they want to
Oh yeah,
tell.
we used to call these content munchers back in the day, defined as a game that feels like reading a book, but where most of the book is, but where it's a book where all of the pages are glued together, and most of your time spent reading the book is carefully ungluing the pages so that you can read the text that is on them. That's what that reminds me of is
Yeah.
the content munchers, which was, for the record, a complaint levied in 2003 against Half-Life 2. I think it was actually technically box, which was Half-Life 2 episode 2 or whatever, but just this idea that like, the thing that you really care about, which I guess in the metaphor are like the narrative sections, you just have you have these gameplay portions that you have to suffer through in order to unlock the next cutscene so that you can advance the story.
It's not quite that bad. It's that the connective tissue is bloated, right? Like not
Mhm.
it's not that it's like total, it's totally worthless. And I think that was worse in Ragnarok. And am I will probably play Laufey, right? I like me some uh Jack Quaid, that's his name. I was gonna say Huey. Um uh at playing the cube named Frank, spelled with a PH and a Q. Um and I do not have as high hopes for like I expect Laufey to be like a 7.5 on the high end. Like that's my high estimate for it. But I still might play it because I'm interested enough. I will not play Wolverine. Um unless, turns out it's actually a great fucking game that everybody loves, but I'm just not interested.
Yeah, I think the problem with these games is that peaked in they kind of peaked with like Arkham Asylum in
Yep.
2008. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just don't think any of them have gotten any better since Assassin's Creed 2 and Arkham Asylum. Just in terms of this like brawlery kind of like one person chain hitting combo kind of counters and dodges and kicks gameplay. I th- it's possible. I guess maybe the apex of this I would say is Shadow of the Mordor, Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of those games is kind of the apex of this gameplay, with stuff like the Nemesis, sort of system.
And
That's about
I,
as
thi-
good as they've ever gotten.
I think there's some room to kind of like run with it if you do interesting stuff. Like Dead as Disco is this kind of combat, but like the gimmick is you're tapping the button to the beat, right?
Yeah.
For bonuses, and that's what makes it work. And Dead as Disco is not as fully featured as any of these games. But like if you do something like that with a twist, I think there's room for it, right? Like I said, I think Spider-Man works because the web swinging is so good, and the kind of other parts of the game are enough to like make it work. But I think I largely agree with you. I think the kind of like standard kind of like, you know, do 40 hours of punching people and go collect tokens game is a little tired at this point. Although people really like Black Flag Resynced, which is basically that, right? Although I guess pirate
Well,
stuff.
the thing about Black Flag, I think Black Flag has some else carrying, which is like the ship combat and
Hmm.
just sort of this extra stuff. You have your little pirate ship. You're running around. You hit a pirate ship with a bunch of cannons, and then you go and you swing over. Like I think all that stuff works. Or makes Black Flag sort of work. But I think there's kind of a reason that Assassin's Creed has never really like hit the same kind of magic. To be fair, I've never played Shadows, which I really want to, which is the Japanese one where you switch between a shinobi who's doing sort of the stealth sections and a samurai who is doing the kind of like the action sword fighting sort of sections, which I always thought was very clever. I guess Valhalla was also like this, but Valhalla had a very similar thing where like Valhalla, you're running around with your long ship raiding fucking villages in England. That was awesome. I loved raiding with my ship, you know? So I don't know. All of it feels a lot like that. I think Elden Ring is the distillation of this in like a combat sort of sense in one way. This is sort of my Souls likeification point, which is that when you start pressing really hard on kind of combat axis, you're driving all games where it is all about, kind of precision timing and big boss fights where you're sort of, I don't know, challenged to commit to your hits, stamina, all of that other kind of stuff. But that's not really what I think these games sort of are like. But hypothetically, you could convince me that you could make a soul like version.
Sure. Yeah. Um. Yeah. Maybe.
Whether or not Insomniac would have there, who knows?
Um. What else? Uh. Game I'd like to call out is this game called The Message from Deep Space. Which is a what's it called? It's a text-based game is maybe the best way to put it. Essentially, you are a translator on a team of scientists that has basically a meteorite has crashed from space and it's sending out a signal, and you are translating the messages. And it was pitched to me as kind of like this very cool kind of like translation game, um, where like you have to kind of like figure out the translation, and there's no like right answer, right? Like the game lets you set what each symbol means, and if you sorry, I need to plug my headset in. uh and if you get it wrong, then you will, like, the sentence will just come out nonsense. You just kind of keep juggling it, and that's a very cool concept. And the way they build to it is they start out with some math stuff, and that's also very cool. But it's a little bit long. I am 4 hours into the game, and I am still figuring out translations for like logic symbols, right? Which is like stuff I know pretty well as like a programmer, but like sitting here and being like, I need to name this symbol and like, so the way the game kind of works is that, especially in this early stage, is it gives you some like basic math stuff, and you have to like give it the right answer. And the right answer shows that you have translated it correctly, because they ask you like 3 or 4 different questions using the symbols. Like, you will only get the right answer if you have the symbols translated correctly. Um, and so it is very cool in that way. It's kind of realistic, and it's making me think a lot about like, oh, how to establish a mode of communication with somebody that you don't share common language with, right? Like, and you don't even have like, you know, on Earth at least you have the rudiments of like, basic human language and shared physiology, right? Like, if we ran into somebody who only spoke like Portuguese, right, we'd at least have some cognates that we could go to, which I believe is
Yeah.
the right word for it, for words that are like the same, that essentially translate across languages. And this it's obviously you don't have any of that. Um, it's very cool, but it is taking so long to get to the part that I would think is interesting, that I don't know if I'm going to be able to sit through it, because it's basically it's like doing this cool little translation challenge and then doing very boring 101 level homework on top of it. It's like, what is 2 plus 3, right? Because you have to verify that you got like the symbol for plus correctly and that you're structuring everything right. Um, uh, and like I said, the Boolean logic I'm on now is relatively simple Boolean logic that is trivial to solve, and it's just making sure that you're figuring out the right symbols. And the name of this game is The Message from Deep Space.
Okay.
Delphas in the chat. Uh, uh,
This sounds like an insane Rachel game for the record. So you are making the right pitch to the right person.
uh, it is it. Like I said, I have been enjoying it. It's just like, you know, once I figure out what the symbol is, having to go through the busy work of verifying that I know what the symbol means is just a little too much for me. Because I think I'm like 110 messages in. And it's taking me like 4 hours, because every time you get a message right, um, it sends you a new message. Um, I will say that the writing surrounding it is pretty good. Um, Basically, you have there's one character who's like the leader. He's the leader of the whole thing, right? He's also the leader of the people who are physically examining the meteorite, and he only checks with you every once in a while. And he's funny because at the end of every week in game, which is just after every certain message, he checks with you. He's like, "So what do you got? Do you know like what they look like? Anything?" And like every week, you're like, "We just communicated that we both understand basic logic." And every week he's like, "Tell me something about these aliens." He's like, "They know math." And so that's fun. Um, and then you've got a the team is you, the translator, an astrophysicist, a computer scientist, and a like a cultural anthropologist, essentially. Um, and their banter is pretty good because the computer scientist is very like matter of fact, and the astronomer is kind of like doofy, and he doesn't have a ton to do because he's like his big at the very beginning he figures out that like the signal that you're getting is based on like the frequency related to hydrogen. um and he just like doesn't have a ton to do because he's just like an astronomer, and most of this is just like doing math, right? um uh but the banter there is pretty fun. So uh I will give this, I'll say 1.5 thumbs up for now, right? The message from deep space.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been playing a couple of different games, but I'm trying so hard to get back into care so little about WoW. I've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, so I'm playing a Dark Urge run where I'm trying to do evil stuff. It's so hard to do evil stuff. But Dark Urge is obviously kind of the very unique gameplay path that they put together for it. But the other thing that I have been playing is Guild Run. I have 20 hours in Guild Run at the moment. Woof. Guild Run is a single player auto battler, auto chess sort of roguelite. So it takes kind of the typical auto chess formula and it puts you up against um, kind of a standardized set of enemies and stuff like that. It is great. It's addictive. The addictive thing about it, the thing that really roped me in, is they have an endless mode. So at the end of your run, you just start cycling the same groups over and over again and see if you can kind of beat them. And eventually you sort of die, and then they have leaderboards tied to those endless runs. And that is awesome and really sucked me in. Technically, they have a gameplay mode that I feel like called Red Rift, which is a win streak mode. It is basically like, can you play at the highest difficulty and beat your run again and again every single time? Unfortunately, I fucking suck at the game because I struggle so hard to win Red Rift mode sort of runs, and I feel like I just don't have the brain. I don't know. It feels like this is appealing to people who are auto chess streamers who, I don't know if you've ever watched or played any sort of like auto chess stuff to like deep levels. There's an auto chess guy for Hearthstone Battlegrounds, which is the auto chess game that I've played a lot of. Where his name is, I think it's just Jeff. Is it Jeff? Is it Hefe or something? I don't know. Whatever. No, it's Jeef. It's Jeef. 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 Watching that guy stream, he is insane because he sees these lines that are like mathematically that nobody else picks up on. He just goes he does insane calculations and he understands what scales. I never get to that point. I don't play these games enough in order to get this. Yeah, it's pronounced GIF. Yeah, Jeef. Jeef. It's pronounced Jeef. I feel like the game Red Rift mode is built for Jeef, and it is not built for me. Wish to God it was built for me. I wish that I could do endless runs on like S rank difficulty or SS rank difficulty. But I don't know. I played a lot of Guild Run. It's very fun. Um, I don't have deeper thoughts about it than that, to be honest with you. It's just it makes the juices go fire in my brain sometimes, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, I have 3.5 hours in it on your recommendation, and it is fun, but I am definitely in that same space as you. Was like I will play these games for a while, and then at the point where I have to like go engage turbo mode in order to keep making progress is when I drop out. Right, like I did the same thing with the Bazaar, which I enjoyed, but like I was like I do not I The thing I don't like about them as especially as single player experiences is essentially that you're kind of up to fate, right? Like, and it's like about probability manipulation and like understanding things at that level. It's like I don't care enough to
Oh, that's so interesting.
to care, right? Like
I have a different gripe, which is that it narrows instead of widens, right? The best part of these games is always the early stages because you're unlocking everything. So the best part of Mentabi, for instance, for the record, is a game that I published. I've spent a lot of time playing. Is the early stages where you're unlocking every Mentabi, and there's a little system in the game. When you unlock a Mentabi, your next run, it is one of your first choices, the Mentabi that you just unlocked. So that's really fun, right? You're playing the game, you're unlocking a new thing. Oh, how does this Mentabi work? Cool. I'm playing with the fucking traffic cone guy. The traffic cone guy puts down turrets, and my whole gameplay is built around his turrets, whatever. My problem is, as these games get more difficult, you can't fuck around as much, right? When I'm doing low ascension in Mentabi as a smart player, I can win a run on basically anything. But what I felt myself doing as I got higher and higher in the ascension levels for Mentabi is narrowing the builds that I was going. And I was basically realizing, okay, what is happening to me kind of all the time here is I am just opting into the same build over and over again because it works and it wins, right? And that's my problem with Guild Run. What I want is a game that encourages me to play at a relatively high difficulty, but with what I would consider kind of off meta choices, right? Where maybe it would almost be like a win streak mode, but it would be a win streak mode that disables the last 5 runs worth of builds for you, right? If you win by, I don't know how you do this in Guild Run, but if you win by stacking this guy and this person is your carry, that hero just doesn't show up for your next 5 runs. That's kind of or maybe it would be like a key relic. I don't know. You could do some really
yeah.
crazy gameplay engineering to this out, but a thing that says your next 5 runs have to look different and you have to figure out a way to win without going back to your tried and true. I know what it's like in Guild Run to win on Funke, who is this like fire mage guy. I have won with him and carry a lot. And he's a little bit of a crutch, kind of. There is, for the record, some of this. They have mastery, which basically tracks like, have you won a run on this hero sort of like level up promotion thing. Basically, heroes start at rank C, but when you rank them up to rank B, they get a kind of subclass of themselves, and the game tracks which of those you've mastered. And so I have been playing to master, which is making me sort of do this thing. But I've very frankly stopped doing Red Rift because I can't win. I have stopped doing triple S difficulty because I can't win. And I am now farming this on double S difficulty because it just feels like the game is asking me to do something that I find possible at those higher levels of difficulty. And maybe I'm just a fucking moron. Who knows?
No,
Maybe I
no,
just don't understand the game, but yeah.
I feel that, and I think that is a similar thing that I have, which is like I do like that fuck around phase, and the point is, I think I'm agreeing with you, which is that you kind of have to target these specific builds in order to get to where you need to go, and that is whether or not you can hit those is based on the randomization. I agree with you.
Yeah, Guild Run completely collapses if you get to your very first, they call it an auction house. They get you a it's fearless mode pitch. I don't know what that means. Lou in the chat says, "Hey, it's fearless mode pitch." Guild Run, there is when you beat a boss, you go to the auction house. The auction house is the only place you can get legendary relics. Legendary relics are like where all of the power is for most builds, right? My very deepest runs have all come from doing, just you luck into a really insane legendary relic. But there's a lot of times where you have a pretty good shield comp going, and then you end up with legendary relics for burn, and you can't pivot your build fast enough to start a build, and you lose. And that happens a lot. It sucks.
I also
Fearless mode is where you can't choose what you did in the previous round. Okay, yeah, that's exactly what I'm pitching essentially.
I think there's the other thing I It's a minor issue with Guild Run is that it feels like the scaling on the endless mode is like bonkers because like without without exception, I have gone from like one level where I have totally dominated, and I was like, oh, this is great. I'm gonna go deep with this. And then the next level, I will just like crumple pretty immediately and not be able to like make headway. I don't know where that's coming from. The other thing about the auction house too is that that's your only opportunity to expand your party size, which I think is a pretty fun to, pretty important thing to kind of hit. I did have my latest run. I did hit my fifth party member in the post game because I picked up one of the conditional fifth slot unlocks, but it's okay. Um, but it's a thing that I burn time with, and I will probably end up falling off of it at
It
some
is
point.
an excellent podcast game. That is really what it
Yeah.
is, right? It's just my podcast game that I can sink hours into at the end of a day, and I don't want to, think too hard.
Have you not been exploring the coiled isle or whatever it's called?
I have not been exploring the coiled isle. I did the questing running up to it. Honestly, people have been complaining about this patch, and my instinct was that they were wrong. And I played the opening chapter of the story, and I thought it was amazing. I was like, "This is great stuff. You guys are all fucking idiots." So I don't know. I'm more up on it, to be honest with you. I'm more hyped than that. But just actually, I don't know. I have a lot of other games that are fighting for my attention. One of them is Minecraft, for the record. Friend of the started a private Minecraft server, and just as I always do with Minecraft, I got into it. I'm building a very crazy thing, and part of that is I am stripping all of the dirt off of this mountain, because this is just how I like to do Minecraft, to take the dirt off so that it's just the stone, and then kind of work with the stone, like the natural stone of the mountain. I just find that very fun and interesting. And I am doing that also. That's another good podcast thing to be doing, is just sitting there with your shovel clicking dirt blocks. Okay, I've done a lot of that. And then so it's that, it's Baldur's Gate, it's Guild Run, and then a quiet number is Lords of the End Time, the long-awaited Warhammer DLC that we all quietly think is going to kind of be the final DLC. They have not announced as such, but I think it's quite likely that it is. Total War Warhammer 3 got its release date announcement trailer. I think I'm going to take the day off. I think I am going to give myself the day off just so that I can play Total War Warhammer 3 the end times. It is going to it looks so cool. It looks kind of amazing. They are adding my very favorite sort of region of the empire, Middenland. Boris Todbringer, the sort of one-eyed elector count of the empire, and all of his special units that I just love. So the story here, the lore here, for people who did not ask, okay, but you are all chained to your chairs in my podcast, so I am going to tell you this, okay? The lore of the empire is that there's the Reichland, is sort of man, right? You have Karl Franz, who has the destined, hammer of Sigmar Heldenhammer, a human who is so powerful that he became a god. He is the god of the empire. And right next to Middenland, right next to Reichland, you have Middenland. And Middenland are the people who worship Ulrich the White Wolf, who is the god of winter, wolves, and battle, and predates Sigmar, and was one of the primary religions in Sigmar. And Boris Todbringer is kind of the Batman to Karl Franz's Superman. Like, everybody in the Empire really Karl Franz, and Boris Todbringer is kind of like, go fuck yourself, Karl Franz. You're worshiping a fake god or whatever. And they have added in all of the sweet units that Boris Todbringer and the Midlanders care about, like the Teutogen Guard, who are these big knights that carry war hammers. They are knights of the White Wolf, and wolf warriors, and stuff that's related to fucking Ulrich, the god of battle and winter or whatever. And I just love all of it so much. That shit, you have no idea.
No, that sounds great. My big thing on the horizon is Star Wars Zero Company, which I might I may also
I've seen a lot of that.
take
I
a
think we could
day
do a whole
2.
episode on it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I am probably gonna do that day one, yeah.
Yeah.
Mostly because it just looks so great.
Yeah.
They did this thing where they released the whole game to influencers. I think this is so clever. They released the whole game to influencers and said you can only make, I think it was 20 minutes, right? Like you can make one 20-minute video, the rest is embargoed, but whatever you want to talk about in that 20 minutes, go for it. Which is genius because it has meant that I got to watch a ton of stuff that are covering all these different aspects of the game and how it works and how cool it is. One guy famously used his 20 minutes to talk about customization, about customizing your fucking stormtrooper, clone troopers, or sort of whatever. But yeah, I don't know. They really sold me on that game. I mean, the pitch of XCOM was great, but they sold me on that game by showing quite a lot of it to me. And I think it's gonna be good. I think it's gonna be great.
Yeah. Awesome. Do I have anything else in here? I bought the board game Arcs. We were supposed to play it yesterday, but somebody screwed up his movie time. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited to try it at some point. The thing that got me really hyped for it was this video by this channel called No Pun Included. It's like this hour and a half video about Arcs. Did you watch it? I sent it to you. I sent it to the.
I watched the first 45 minutes,
Okay.
maybe first hour. As Rachel and I were driving down to the movie theater, we were listening to. And I think we got about an hour in. I mean, it's about an hour. I'm gonna be honest with you. First of all, Rachel fell asleep while listening to this video. Second of all, she said, "This makes me not." I asked. I was like, "Are you excited to play Ark?" She's like, "I'm gonna play," and I was like, "Well, I mean, are you excited to play?" And she was like, "Buddy, that video made it sound like it sucks," which I kind of think is true. But yeah. So anyway, so I listened to the first hour of the.
Okay. No, it seems so elegant, right? Like the systems, I look at the systems and I'm like, oh, the way this works, it's just like it like forces these like terrible, these like hard choices onto you, right? Like and I'm excited for that, right? I'm excited for the kind of like you have to juggle trying to capture priority, trying to score, trying to, do the things you want to do, and using your cards. I don't know. It seems, I don't know. I'm excited to play it. I'm just so hyped to play it. Just the base game for
Yeah, I
now.
mean, I am a Root enjoyer, famously. We have not played Root like up here, but I played Root a little bit in Los Angeles and online. And so it's the same people, same guy, so I certainly believe, and obviously Foundation is my favorite novel. My favorite kind of book series or whatever. Though I will say this is different than what Foundation is for the record. I mean, it obviously uses kind of the setup of like the fall of the Great Galactic Empire or whatever, but like I don't know. I was not thrilled. Talking about adaptation budget, I was not thrilled by the way that that guy described Foundation, right? Like that's kind of the premise of
Okay.
Foundation, but what makes Foundation awesome and interesting is, all of this other stuff that plays out. Um, uh, but anyway,
Yeah. He also said
yeah.
he doesn't really like Foundation. So, there's that,
Yeah,
that
I love Foundation, and I think, and he did say a couple of things that are true about it, which is that like Foundation is a generations story. It is a story about the like people who have heard of previous you will read a chapter of Foundation, and then the next chapter will be set 75 years in the future where there's like a mythologized protagonist you were just following who like this person is comparing themselves to or something like that. And on that level I do get arcs, in that vein. That does sort of make sense to me. Yeah.
I am, speaking of generational stories, I have ordered a hardcover copy of Dune because I want to reread the first 4 books of Dune before Dune 3 comes out. I can be
Oh
properly
gosh, yeah.
aggravated at the adaptation. I watched the trailer and I was not happy about it. Um,
Really? Wow.
well, because
Okay.
I thought what they were going to do was just swap Chani and Princess Irulan. Because in
Mhm.
the book, Chani remains devoted to um to Paul. And Irulan conspires against him. But it seems like both of them are going to be conspiring against him in this movie. And it's like, well, it's just like they're probably just gonna replace probably the navigator. So spoilers for Dune Messiah, I think.
Yep.
Um, uh, the basically the Space Guild navigators also use a lot of spice, and he uses it enough. Like essentially, his spice use essentially basically the use of spice gives the space navigators enough of kind of a protective bubble that makes it hard for or impossible for Paul to predict the way Paul's powers work is that the spice gives him essentially premonition powers, right? The ability to kind of like follow things to their conclusions to see what's going to happen, right? And the spacing navigators use enough spice that their ability to do that interferes with Paul's ability to predict their stuff. And by conducting meetings with this navigator, they are able to kind of like hide from Paul's foresight. Um, and I assume that Shiny's going to take that role in Dune 3 as the person who is capable of evading uh Paul's foresight. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. Uh,
Okay. Well, I don't know. Yeah, we'll see. In 70 millimeter, probably. For me, at least.
all right. Well, uh, let's wrap this up then. If you'd like to email us about any of the things we talked about on this podcast, email us at subversivegames@gmail.com or podcast at subversivegames.com. You can watch it at twitch.tv/subversivegames or youtube.com/subversivegames. All the links will be down in the description. Buddy, you have anything you're looking to promote?
I don't think I have anything I'm looking to promote.
In that case, I'm going to say until next time, dear listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.